Hello and welcome to the Weekly Bread. The world's delving deeper into intoxication, so have some bread to sober you up. I'm trying a new thing here, so please bear with me, but I do hope you learn something at least. We first go into our slice of the week. The Americans have made their first move in the modern day space race with the landing of a lunar probe by Intuitive Machines, part of NASA's initiative of collaborating with private companies. This mission was part of NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services Initiative, or CLPS, a program announced back in 2018 that aims to enlist the services of private companies to bolster a new industry around lunar exploration. The governing body is investing $2.6 billion into the various projects that fall under this wing, this being the second. The first mission ended in failure due to a propellant leak, while many more are planned up until 2028. The Intuitive Machines mission ended after 5 days when the spacecraft's solar panels lost contact with the sun, but was still deemed a success. Chris Bodger, Director of Human Spaceflight and Exploration at DRAPA, has mentioned there being an explosion of commercial interest in the moon that's benefited greatly from NASA funding. There are companies that were barely in existence, were in their infancy, that grew to mature companies that can provide the service, he told Euronews. He added that all of these missions are providing immense lessons learned for those that haven't launched yet. It's a tight community. There's a lot of transparency and sharing information that we can factor into the mission objectives. CLPS is providing more opportunities to go to the moon to develop scientific missions, now that it's not restricted to government bodies. Nicolas Peter, president of the International Space University in France, told Euronews. He called the mission the beginning of a new race to the moon between the US, China, India, and Japan. The motivations behind this are many, including experimenting with new technologies like deep storage and resource extraction. In Europe, France has become the first country in the world to enshrine the right to abortion in their constitution, with the bill having passed by 780 votes to 72 in the French parliament. This change was campaigned after the US Supreme Court ruled against the right to abortion on a federal level 2 years ago, leaving it to the individual American states to set their own laws surrounding the practice. This right has retreated in the United States, the BBC reported Laura Slimani of the Fondation des Femmes saying. And so, nothing authorized us to think that France was exempt from this risk. There's a lot of emotion, as a feminist activist, also as a woman. While there has been little pushback from politicians to the constitutional amendment, critics of French President Emmanuel Macron have accused him of pushing this law unnecessarily in order to bolster his standing with the left-leaning electorate ahead of the election season. They argue that abortion was already a constitutional right, as France's Constitutional Council ruled in favour of the practice back in 2001, based on the notion of liberty outlined in the 1789 Declaration of the Rights of Man, considered to be a part of the French Constitution. Critics to the amendment include the Catholic Church, of course, with the Vatican calling for all governments and all religious traditions to do their best so that, in this phase of history, the protection of life becomes an absolute priority. Over in Africa, the Sudanese army has reclaimed the national broadcaster's headquarters in what they call a major victory in the country's civil war. Videos have been shared showing soldiers celebrating outside the building in Omdurman, sister city to Sudan's capital of Khartoum, located just across the Nile. The Sudanese armed forces riding the building this entire time, the RSF have been unable to take control of the national broadcast, as the facilities for doing so were moved to another part of the country, where they kept televising pro-army content. In Asia, a new report by Human Rights Watch, or HRW, is a deep dive into the changes to border security along the North Korea-China border, and shows an unprecedented withdrawal of the Hermit Kingdom from the outside world. The report analyzed satellite images of the border. These measures decimated trade between North Korea and China, both formal and informal, that had already been badly damaged by UN sanctions back in 2017 in response to North Korea's commitment to developing nuclear weapons. The HRW estimated that only 10% of money brokers were able to cross the border in 2023, compared to figures from 2019. The report states that these measures have exacted a toll on the population at large by undermining people's rights to an adequate standard of living and thus to food and health. It also goes on to say that this had an especially hard impact on women, the main breadwinners in most households, by reducing the activities in the markets in which they traded. Over in North America, the US House of Representatives has decided to pass a report, having been pushed through with a 352 to 65 vote. 50 Democrats and 15 Republicans stood in opposition. Speaking to reporters, Wisconsin Republican Representative Mike Gallagher, the chair of a committee on China, has denied that this is an unconditional ban of the app. It puts the choice squarely in the hands of TikTok, he says, to sever their relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. As long as ByteDance no longer owns the company, TikTok can continue to survive. For context, ByteDance, who own TikTok, are a Chinese company subject to Chinese laws. One of these laws states that companies must support, assist, and cooperate with intelligence work, which legal experts say is quite vague. If the bill is passed, ByteDance would have 5 months to sell TikTok off, lest the app be banned from app stores in the USA. TikTok themselves aren't very happy with the decision, writing on Twitter that this legislation has a predetermined outcome, a total ban of TikTok in the United States. They claim that this is an attempt to strip its user base, 170 million in the country, of their freedom of expression. This will damage millions of businesses, deny artists an audience, and destroy the livelihoods of countless creators in the country, they say. Standing in TikTok's defense are the younger generation of Americans who, at the company's behest, have been sending their representatives letters expressing their frustration at the bill. ByteDance's home country has also stood up for them, calling the House's move an act of bullying. Perhaps most surprising among the TikTok defenders, though, is Donald Trump. The man who, during his presidency, also tried to ban the app has come to see it in a different light, saying that there's, a lot of good and a lot of bad on TikTok. His shift in position comes mainly from a disdain of the alternative, it seems. He argued in a post on his social media app, Truth, that if TikTok were gone, Facebook would just take its place and continue the data collection, adding that the app has been very bad for our country, and describing it, along with its CEO, as an enemy of the people. The bill's next destination is the Senate, although the majority leader there, Chuck Schumer, has not committed to a vote on it yet. President Joe Biden has stated he would sign the act if it reached his desk. In South America, Alberto Otaola, Prime Minister of Peru, has been forced to resign after a conversation was leaked where he confessed his love to a woman and helped her obtain government contracts. The audio recording, aired by a Peruvian TV broadcaster, depicts the 57-year-old declaring his affection for 25-year-old Yazire Pinedo, asking her to send him her CV. Last year, Pinedo was reported to have won 2 government contracts with the Defense Ministry, worth a total of 53,000 sol, more or less 13,000 euros. Both parties have claimed this conversation happened in 2021, before Otarola became a minister. He served as defense minister until the end of 2022, when he was promoted by newly elected President Dina Boluarte. The same president called him back from a state visit to Canada when the recordings dropped, and he resigned soon after. In his resignation speech, he denied all claims, saying that those who have always wanted me out of government have not even hesitated to edit an audio with a veiled purpose of tarnishing my image. One of those people accused is former PM Martin Vizcarra, who called the claims delusional. In Oceania, a Guardian Australia report has revealed that the Australian government back in 2020 knowingly ordered $100 million worth of face masks from a retailer with no history of selling PPE. Last year, an investigation by the news agency found that the government had made the order to a relatively obscure company called Australian Business Mobiles, or ABM, of 50 million masks and 10 million gowns, even though the country was mostly in the business of things like air fryers, robot vacuum cleaners, and massage guns. The company had contracted 2 Cypriot companies to procure the goods from China. The Australian Taxation Office reportedly had received documents from a whistleblower detailing how the Cypriot companies made a total of $40 million off the deal, while 46 of the 50 million face mask receives ended up having to be scrapped due to non-compliance with safety regulations. Now, a Freedom of Information request by Guardian Australia has shown that the health department knew of the risks, as senior officials had been told ABM does not ordinarily supply PPE. They also noted ABM's inclusion of a liability cap in their contract talks that would limit their repercussions in case something went wrong with the delivery, however maintained that the risk was manageable. In emails exchanged between the health department and ABM, an ABM employee emphasized the rush to get the deal closed. Our factories are busy and we need to move quickly now to lock in your order requirements so a contract is possible today is essential if possible, they wrote. The federal government had used human health exemptions to fast forward the normal procurement process to grant ABM the contract. Meanwhile, 7 seats in Parliament means their voice remains a heavy influence in the country's politics. Still, party officials weren't happy. Fernando Medina, head of the Finance Ministry, lamented, "We're faced with elections that shouldn't have happened at this time, less than halfway into the term of an absolute majority government. The Parliament that comes from this will be of great fragility and instability," he said. Medina warned that the political system will become dependent on a far-right force with great sway, adding that said force will have the capacity to influence the centre-right policies in the coming legislature. Speaking of, certainly the biggest winners of the night were Chega, the far-right party headed by former football commentator Andrea Ventura, who won 48 seats in Parliament, surpassing 1 million individual votes. "I feel like even though we didn't win," he said, "which was the ultimate goal we set for ourselves, we've managed something historic in Portugal." He declared this in his post-election speech, adding that this had been the day that marks the end of bipartisanship in Portugal. "We now have a majority in our hands. The Portuguese have granted it to us," the Chega leader said in relation to the combined votes of his party and AD, adding that "we will be completely irresponsible if we don't bring it to fruition with a government which I hope tomorrow we will begin to make." His wish still has hurdles though, as AD leader Nuno Montenegro has stated he will refuse to form a coalition with Ventura. With that being the case, AD's hopes to form a government are dependent on negotiations with PS to form a centre coalition, but Fernando Medina notes that there are many areas in which there isn't an agreement between the parties. PS could try and form their own governing coalition with the other left-leaning parties if President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa allows it, but if they can't, the Portuguese may be heading towards another election.